It's the World Soccer Talk podcast, the only podcast that focuses on watching soccer on TV, online and apps. In episode 102, we discuss a huge weekend of soccer viewing in the US, with 5 games averaging more than 1 million viewers. Jon Champion bids farewell to the Premier League, our thoughts on the MLS Cup final and the TV rating, and we have a bunch of letters from you, the listeners, in our mailbag section. My name is Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, and I'm joined by my co-host Kartik Krishnaiyer. Kartik, it's been a crazy week of soccer. I don't know about you, but in terms of everything that's gone on since the last podcast, we had some big games in the Premier League. We had the Fan Fest. We had the MLS Cup final. We had the River Boca final in the Copa Libertadores. We had Liga MX. The semi-finals, now we know who's going to be playing in the final. This is recording this Thursday. The first match is tonight. So, and then of course the Champions League and Turner Sports sending people over to Spain to commentate that game. A lot to get into. Where would you like to start?
Well, for me, I had a Fox-heavy weekend. For me personally, maybe the most important match was on Friday. It was Bremen and Fortuna Dusseldorf. I cleared my schedule to watch this match, knowing Josh Sargent, the American phenom. And I don't get as excited about young Americans. I think people who know me know this, as others, including Pulisic. I mean, I still have some skepticism about Pulisic long-term as the kind of superstar, global superstar so many Americans have made him out to be. But Sargent has something about him that I've noticed. So I was real excited about this and watched this match on Fox. He gets on, he scores within 2 minutes. Yes, it was a bit of a sitter.
That had to be the luckiest goal I've ever seen in my life.
No, it wasn't the luckiest goal.
Well, as far as the goalkeeper, hit his shoulder. The goalkeeper had no idea where it went. The ball goes up flying. Positionally wise, yeah, he was in the right place at the right time. But
that's something that I noticed in the 15, 20 minutes he was on the pitch. He almost scored another goal. And this is why I'm so excited about this kid. I think I watch football a lot differently than most Americans do. His positioning sense, the runs I've seen him make off the ball when playing for the national team and the youth national teams, the composure when he gets a touch on the ball, or some things you don't normally see in American players. Yeah, I guess Pulisic does have it. I think Michael Bradley was a guy that had it. That's going to cause all kinds of anger on this podcast. But in terms of actual attacking players, number 9s, I don't think we've had a guy quite with that skill set, maybe since Eric Winalda. And Brian McBride was fantastic, did a lot through hard work. Josie Altidore has had gaps in his game. So that's why I was excited about this. I cleared my schedule, watched this match in its entirety, taped Juve-Inter, which was going on at the same time, and watched this. Juve-Inter was a good match. Watched that on the DVR. ESPN becoming very comfortable in Serie A. And there was an ESPN FC program leading into the match because it was such a big match. Inter disappointing. They were disappointing in Champions League midweek. Schalke Dortmund I watched, which was a big hype derby, obviously because of the two Americans, in addition to being one of the biggest derbies in Europe. McKinney versus Pulisic. McKinney was very good. Pulisic played for 1 minute. So there's the gap in playing time for those guys now. Keith Costigan and Jovan Karofsky were fantastic. Obviously, Jovan Karofsky's played in this derby, understands the culture around it. Keith Costigan becoming one of the premier voices of football in this country, even though Fox doesn't give him the sort of exposure they probably should on other events. Very, very good broadcast. So I'm thinking that's a good weekend for Fox, right, Chris?
Yeah, it's a good start.
Good start. Women's World Cup draws next. I watched that, and it was unwatchable after 20 minutes. I start tweeting, what do I do about this? People suggest, hey, just watch FIFA stream on YouTube. So I did that. I turned Fox off.
Well, I missed it, Kartik, so I didn't see the Women's World Cup draw. And actually on Friday, I think I watched some other matches too. I watched the Sheffield United against West Brom game, I think, which was a really, really entertaining. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was West Brom against, I forgot who it was now.
Aston Villa, yeah,
the derby.
The hand of God.
Yeah, with Jon Champion. So I watched that one, and so that was the 2-2 draw. I really enjoyed that one. But the World Cup draw for the women, I missed it. So why was it so bad? What was bad about it?
It was just all very kind of clunky production, loud graphics, and then talk about the United States. Everything was based on the United States. And the women's game, okay, the U.S. is at the top of the women's game, but the women's game is more competitive than ever. And I thought, you and I commented on this a few years ago, that Fox's 2015 Women's World Cup coverage wasn't as jingoistic as we thought it would be until the very end of the tournament, remember? Mm-hmm. But it seems like they're starting early with the draw. So look, it's just, again, personal preference. A lot of people like that. They're driven to the women's game because of the women's national team, U.S. women's national team. I get that. They're catering to that fan base, but I was able to watch it on YouTube. Telemundo was broadcasting it also, I was told, as a lead-in. Instead of doing a pregame to pre-match Chelsea, Man City, they were broadcasting the draws as the lead-in. So I could have watched it there as well. But it was just classic Fox, which continued. Chelsea, Man City, I watched on NBC. We can talk about that in a little more detail later. But then MLS Cup, Chris. Fox's production. Now we're going to talk about their production rather than their actual on-air talent. Their production and level of presentation, it just doesn't have the same feel as an event on ESPN or NBC or even now on Turner. I mean, I'm impressed when I watched Turner's pregame show about how much more the first few weeks were a shambles, right? But how much more professional it seems. The graphics are timed properly, things like that compared to Fox. I just thought it was a very embarrassingly low-level production for such a big event and an event that got such good ratings. We can talk about the match. We can talk about John Strong's and Stuart Holden's call. We can nitpick at that stuff. But Fox still, I don't know if it's budget, Chris, or if it's just commitment level or not understanding things, but their production teams are just not at the same level, at least from what we can see on the output, as the other networks. So
some listeners may faint, but I didn't think Fox's coverage was that bad. I guess I was going in with low expectations, especially with the corner flag cam, and thinking about, okay, how bad is this going to be, where they're going to focus on silly things that don't need focusing on. I didn't think it was that bad. From a production point of view, yes, there were issues in terms of the camera crews kind of really zooming in too closely to the play, and you weren't able to see what was happening kind of on the fringes of that. My guess is probably they were using a whole bunch of NFL or even college football cameramen in the stadium who were not used to shooting soccer, so that wasn't good. The other issue I had with it was that and this is in contrast now to the Premier League Fan Fest on NBC Sports, but anytime something amazing happens, maybe it was a goal or some incredible save, whatever it may have been, what happened was that on Fox, they would zoom in on this platform, and there would be like 3 people on the platform standing in front of the crowd. So you'd see maybe somebody holding a flag, or 2 girls or 2 women kind of high-fiving each other when they scored a goal. And to me, I was like, it wasn't that exciting. I was like, why do you zoom in on this platform of 3 people standing, just jumping up for joy? But show the crowd, show the fans going crazy. And that's in complete contrast to the Premier League Fan Fest, because anytime something major happened in any of those games, NBC would zoom back into that crowd. So Chelsea scores, at halftime, they show the highlights of Chelsea scoring, and you see like 200 or 300 Chelsea fans just going crazy, absolutely crazy, jumping up for joy. Or even if it's Spurs or Man City, you get that, you capture that emotion and that celebration and that pure joy. And with Fox, it was strange. Like, why are you showing these 3 people standing on this platform? Yes, the crowd's behind it, but you're focusing on the wrong things. But overall, Kartik, I thought it wasn't that bad. The interesting thing...
The commentators were fine. I mean, my issue... Thank you for pointing that out, Chris. The camera work, I was going to get to that. The camera work was a disaster.
The interesting thing, pre-match, I'd like to get your take on this one, where they had the really short interview with Greg Berhalter pre-match, and it was weird for Kartik, because I don't know if Greg Berhalter was nervous But it seemed to be like very kind of Rob Stone was touchy-feely, kind of like patting him on the shoulder, kind of like touching him, and Mo would do the same thing too, like almost as if like Greg Berhalter was extremely nervous, and they were just trying to carry him through the broadcast in terms of answering the questions. Now, the answering the questions he did okay with. He just very short, didn't really say anything of any substance. No surprise there, but it didn't fill me with a lot of confidence that this is going to be the man that's leading the U.S. men's national team for the next few years. And at the same time, I just thought it was really weird. Even Rob Stone asking him about his kids. I mean, it just really seemed to be buddy-buddy. It didn't seem to be kind of I'm a presenter, I'm going to ask some tough questions here. It was very much, hey, high five, touch your shoulder type of thing.
Yeah, and that point was not lost on lots of people I've talked to this week who were saying, okay, we're going to give Berhalter a chance. Yeah, we would have preferred a Vermees or a Marsh or an Osorio or whoever. And then watched that interview and said, one, I got a lot of feedback on this. One, it's classic Rob Stone as a presenter. And again, I mean, I think we saw the difference between Rob Stone and Kate Abdo this week when you watch Champions League with Holden and Nash out of the studio and in Valencia or in Madrid and then in Valencia. You had this situation where you just had the focus on the three in the Atlanta studio, right? And Kate was asking, I've been critical of her on previous shows, but she was asking some very good questions of Tim Howard and Mo Adu. And I enjoyed their tactical analysis on the Wednesday show in particular, or actually Tuesday as well, when they talked about how Liverpool was going to play with the ball. And Tim Howard moved the players and kind of showed an asymmetrical formation, but where he thought Liverpool would end up at the end of the match, and he was right tactically. Rob Stone asked these very soft questions, and it wasn't lost on people. And the Berhalter answers and his nervousness or his reluctance, people I've spoken to this week have said, well, this is exactly why the Federation probably wanted him, because he's not going to speak out the way Vermees would. We know how Peter Vermees is, or the way that Jurgen Klinsmann and Bruce Arena previously did. And that also maybe he's a guy that they can very easily script to say certain things. Whereas even if you try and keep a Vermees on message, I'm using Peter Vermees as the example because he's the guy. He wasn't my first choice for the job, but he's talking to people. It seems like he's the guy getting snubbed that more people around the American game at least are unhappy about than Jesse Marsh, who was my choice. And even if you get Vermees in a situation like that, Chris, with Rob Stone, he'll be spontaneous and he'll probably go off script. He won't just answer the question, but he'll say something else. Mm-hmm. So it was, I think, a very glaring and telling demonstration for everybody about, one, where the U.S. Federation is and where their heads are, and two, where Fox is and where their heads are.
Yeah, and it was a very short interview. It wasn't anything substantial, too. And it was hard, too, because it's just right before the game is starting. The crowd's loud and crazy, which is a fantastic crowd, a great game for that, but so it's difficult, I think, for him to hear the questions too. So, but yeah, not a good look, and to me, it doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. Now, in terms of the game itself, Kartik, I thought that the teams coming out and then the national anthem. The national anthem was incredible. I was like, wow, this girl can sing. Really great television, but even with the teams coming out and the fireworks and the MLS Cup in the background, and that was great television, and I thought that was really well done. The game itself, Kartik, I was really disappointed. I was expecting Portland to put up more of a fight. This one, Atlanta completely dominated this game, and I don't think Portland had a shot on goal the entire game. And I was really disappointed because I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a really good chess match between these two sides. But it was Atlanta completely dominated the game. And yes, it was watchable. I watched the game with my daughter, sat down, enjoyed it. But it was not the level of a cup final that I was expecting.
You don't remember Gio Savarese, and I love Gio. I have a lot of time for him, both as personally and professionally. But you don't remember Gio in some big matches with the New York Cosmos. This is what they did. They would sit deep. Generally, they wouldn't concede that goal, though. Now, actually, in a match I was at, a big NASL championship match between Fort Lauderdale, the team I worked with, and the Cosmos, we scored first up in New York, and then he had to open up. But generally, he sits deep in knockout stage matches. He did it against Kansas City as well. But with the Cosmos, he did the same thing, even though he had in that league arguably more talent than the opposition. Our Fort Lauderdale team that year had comparable talent to them. They sit back, generally, teams, and absorb a lot of pressure and try to get to halftime at 0-0. Parker's controversial goal, which maybe should have been chalked off, but that kind of changed everything, because I think Gio was tactically playing for a halftime. Maybe by the 60th minute, he lets Valeri and company run wild in the second half after a certain point. But it was this is the problem when you get a manager who's thinking defensively and they're away from home in a one-off match. We've seen it in Champions League finals. We've seen it in other one-off matches like this, where if there is a goal, if the superior team scores a goal early, that's kind of it. And that's what happened. It wasn't that early, but yeah, Atlanta dominated the match. And they're just a very, very good team to to watch. They're easy on the eye. But I think that there's also a certain degree of, how do I put it, Chris? When I've watched Atlanta recently, including the Red Bulls, which would surprise me from the Red Bulls, there's a certain degree of negativity. I think those of us who watch a lot of European football are used to this. When they're a superior footballing side going up against teams that defensively aren't very good, aren't typically teams that like to play with the ball, you get these sorts of matches, and especially in these situations.
Yeah, Atlanta United, and this is they're not on this level by any means, but Atlanta United reminded me of what Manchester United was in the past, when they were so dominant in cup finals, where it would be a great team, a fantastic team to watch, attacking, and the other team would be there merely just to make up the numbers, and that's how I felt from this one. Even after the game, I thought to myself, okay, Atlanta, they're losing their coach. They're probably going to lose a couple of their key players. But they could, if they make a smart decision and bring in the right person, actually continue this to be a complete domination and legacy for years to come if they play the cards right. And that was the feeling I got from this match. Now in a weekend that should have been all about the MLS Cup final, I thought it was completely overshadowed by a brilliant River Boca game, the final of the Copa Libertadores, and to me, Kartik, the Premier League weekend that featured Liverpool climbing to the top of the Premier League table. Now you have a title race and an emotional segment by NBC Sports on the important topic of racism in England with Robbie Earle.
But by the way, I did not see that segment, but I did see the segment on TNT with Mo Adu and Tim Howard, and it was really good. On the whatever day pregame show, would have been when they talked about Sterling, so Wednesday pregame.
Wednesday, yeah, and Robbie also was really good. I mean, he was, you could tell he was emotional about it. He was talking about it, and then towards the end, you could see that he started to tear up. And Rebecca Lowe, she's reached her hand out and said, basically, thank you for opening up your heart and telling this, because this is a very difficult topic to cover. And Robbie didn't go into a lot of specifics, but did mention about in terms of that he's been through similar experiences in the past before too, and just gave his honest opinions and just said in terms of the Premier League needing to do more. For anyone who did miss it, definitely check it out, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on the NBC Sports Soccer Twitter account. It's there and it's highly recommended. And the Mo Adu Tim Howard piece midweek too with Kate Abdo, I thought was just as good. I mean, it was really kind of giving their honest opinions, and sharing exactly what it feels like, and really just being very, very critical against whether it's Sepp Blatter or Infantino or even Jurgen Klopp in terms of the things they've been saying and the lack of what people should be doing, what organizations and FIFA should be doing to try to stamp this out. And it was a topic that was much needed. And I think without Robbie Earle talking about it on Sunday, probably TNT wouldn't have talked about it on Wednesday. But it was all in all a really touching on both points, but really well worth it and good television. But at the end of the day, a really good message.
Yeah, I think that's coming out of this weekend, though. I think between Copa Libertadores and MLS Cup is that what a fantastic Copa Libertadores final, one of the best matches I've watched this year, is that Atlanta United, and this is a big challenge for MLS or for MLS fans too, Atlanta United is now emerging as this super club, something MLS has never had before. I mean, you could say the Galaxy, you could say Seattle. They had very limited kind of niche followings in the global game. Pity Martinez, right after the match, he was one of the stars in the Copa Libertadores final, said, this is my last river. I'm going to Atlanta United. I can never imagine a player of his stature saying, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going, at his age, saying, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to the Portland Timbers, for lack of a better team, right? Or the New York City FC. Now, does MLS and American soccer, which has reined in the idea of dominant clubs, super clubs, clubs whose branding abroad outweighs that of the league, will they embrace this? Because I get the sense this is something completely new. This is uncharted territory for the league. And from talking to people, there is some resentment, like, whoa, they think they're bigger than the league. They think that they invented the sport in this country. No, they didn't. Atlanta United didn't invent the sport in this country, but they certainly did take it to another level that you and your other however many teams, I can't even 20-something teams before, were unable to do. Not just in this country, but abroad in terms of credibility of one of your clubs. So that to me is a takeaway from the weekend. Yeah,
I think we don't want a Bayern Munich and a Bundesliga type of level, but I think it's important to have big clubs and dominant clubs that are going to kind of rise up and really kind of attract a lot of people and get a lot of fans to be watching those clubs. So Atlanta United is a perfect example of that, a club that's doing everything right. And I see nothing wrong with that in terms of trying to build that club into a kind of a dominant club and then hope that the others will rise with that too. The challenge is that many of the other ones are making a lot of the wrong decisions and not rising up to that level. So, but I think in many ways too, it incentivizes the other clubs to try harder because they have to in order to compete. But Kartik, I know that you probably didn't watch much of the Premier League Fan Fest over the weekend, and to me, I really enjoyed it. To me, it's a validation for a lot of these fans of clubs from around the country, soccer fans around the country that are fans of Premier League clubs. So it was great seeing on television. You had everything from Leicester City fans, Leeds United fans, Brighton, Cardiff, Newcastle, and of course the big clubs too, Chelsea, Man City, Man United, etc. It was one of those rare days that you had all the major big clubs playing on the Saturday, obviously in England, but with the fans being able to congregate in this place and really celebrate, the fandom of these clubs. And I really enjoyed it. It was good television. It was really, really good to see. And I think at the end of the day, it's validation. It's like if you're a Leicester City fan and you live in Alabama and you're watching it on television, seeing all these other Leicester City fans, it makes you feel that you're part of the club, part of the whole following of this side in this country.
Some quick takeaways from NBC's Premier League coverage this weekend. I did not get to watch most of it. I completely forgotten about the Fan Fest. I did not turn NBC on until 12:30 Eastern time on Saturday, and that had something else to do during the 2:45 game. But two quick notes. One, I really liked the job they're doing, the stat crew, placement of graphics, statistical graphics that are relevant during the Newcastle Wolves match on Sunday. They had some really good graphics about Rafa Benitez's record, about Wolves as a newly promoted team, that they just slipped in at a perfect time when Jon Champion, who I know we're going to get to, talk a lot about him today, I guess, when Jon Champion mentioned certain things, even though he's not an NBC broadcaster, they were paying attention very clearly to his broadcast for the international feed and pushing good graphics on. The second thing is, Chris, from talking to contacts in the UK, there is beginning to be blowback on this 7:45 p.m. kickoff time on Saturdays from fans. Obviously, that's good for NBC. That's good for the U.S. audience. And Leicester played Spurs this week. That is going to become a normal feature in the new TV contract starting next season. And I'm already picking up both among some other media in the UK and among some fans that they do not like that start time. It's too late for a Saturday night for local fans and for people in the UK to watch. And so let's see how that plays out. Obviously, 3 years. We'll have 3 years of start times at that time. I think it's great for us in the States. I'm excited about it, but some blowback from the UK on that already.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that there's blowback from the UK. To me though, Kartik, having grown up in the UK and then having lived in the United States now for over 35 years, to me it seems to be silly or weird in a way, because I mean you've got a 7:45 game kicking off local time in the UK. By the time it's over, you mean it's 10 o'clock, and in most major kind of countries in the world, especially in the westernized world, in terms of transportation, there should be no problem in getting a transportation back to where you live. Now, I understand in terms of people living in certain parts of the country where train service ends at Saturday at 10 o'clock at night, but to me, it's part of it is kind of the transportation system in terms of being open up later so that they can service these types of things going on.
Yeah, okay, that's a big part of it. So fans from the north saying, well, the last train that leaves Euston or leaves Liverpool Street or whichever station going back to my locale, my area, out of London will leave before the end of that match. I'm stuck spending an extra night, spending money and a night in a hotel room in London if, let's say, Burnley has to play at Crystal Palace in that match. Which I think part of the issue. Which
I think for a lot of Americans is probably very strange and weird. It's like, why wouldn't the trains run late, and have a later train? So yeah, I completely understand where the UK's blowback is coming from, and from my side, I'm saying that there's got to be a way to make this work. But. And again, at the end of the day, it's all about television. So they don't care as much about the actual fans in the stadium, but hopefully it'll transition into making this happen and making this a permanent thing. I enjoy it. It's a full day of football from early morning to late afternoon. It actually ends up being a good day. The River Boca game, Kartik, I won't go into a lot of detail about this one, but I did enjoy it. It was my favorite match of the entire week, and anyone who wants to see just a world-class goal, check out Boca Juniors' first goal that they scored in this game. Just an incredible pass that split the defense. One touch by one, I forgot who scored it, to jump over a defender and slot the ball into the back of the net, and then River Plate came back. Just a really incredible game. The last 10 minutes of the game, the goalkeeper was up for corner kicks, opposite side of the field, empty goal, empty net. Just crazy, immense pressure, and just an amazing game. Really, really good game. Fox Deportes, I watched this one on, and Telemundo showed it too.
Yeah, Telemundo was great. Contour was fantastic. For those who maybe haven't watched South American football very much in the past, you might realize that this match was essentially a cross between La Liga and the Premier League. You had a lot of the same kind of great technical goals that you see in La Liga, but you had sort of hard tackling and physical play you tend to see in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. So it was just for a spectacle, because I know people have personal preferences. Some people like League because it's fast and frenzied, and there's a lot of hard tackling and bad giveaways in midfield that lead to quick counterattacks. A lot of people like La Liga because the build-up is very technical. The touches are better than the Premier League. The goals tend to be more spectacular. Premier League has spectacular goals too, but you know what I mean from a technical standpoint than the Premier League. This match was basically the combination of the two. That's simplifying it a bit.
That's a good point. That's a good description of it, Kartik. I completely agree, and also even in terms of the speed and the just frenetic nature of the game, it reminded me of some of the best Premier League in terms of just crazy. You're like, oh my gosh, this match is going insane. Rather than symptoms, maybe say La Liga, where it's more tranquilo, just kind of relaxed, calm under pressure, pass. It was had that passion, and of course you got the fan base too on top of that adds a whole other degree of just amazingness. But really, really good game. Kartik, so Champions League. So let's avoid the Spurs-Barcelona game for a second and talk about everything else from the Champions League from this week from Turner's broadcasting. Turner, again, Kartik doing a great job. I think Tuesday pre-match, they had kind of a live tactical breakdown of Kubai against Mo Salah, and this is their prediction of, kind of showing some pre-match, showing some other games that they played against each other, and how they kind of Kubai was able to kind of really take Salah out of the game. and which is really, really good because in the game itself, Salah's goal came from kind of Salah being able to get past Kubai. But really, really good tactical breakdown there on the set. And also enjoyed the walkthrough that Stu Holden and Steve Nash did of La Masia in Barcelona, showing them kind of like basically all these greats and these young stars of the future, kind of where they reside and what their environment is like that too. And I thought the pre-match, I thought Stu Holden and Steve Nash, they have a really good chemistry together, Kartik. We've talked about this before, but I really honestly think that their chemistry is better than the chemistry between John Strong and Stu Holden. I think John Strong is a little bit more, seems to be more uptight and more kind of straight-laced. And I think with Steve Nash, Stu gets to kind of relax a little bit more and kind of joke back and forth a little bit better. And the chemistry, to me, works really, really well together. Now, that's pre-match. The game itself, the Spurs-Barcelona game, I understand this was an experiment. I understand that in terms of them wanting to try something different. And as you said, Kartik, I think in some of your Twitter comments, your criticism was more about the actual production in terms of the decision to do this. But to me, what a car crash this was. This was absolutely horrible in terms of just first starting off with the mics not working. I mean, Stu Holden's mic not working correctly, so it sounded horrible. But at the same time, you had the Liverpool-Napoli game. I'm watching that game, and I go back to the Barcelona-Spurs game, like every few minutes, just to listen in and check in. And the energy level was completely flat. I mean, there was kind of, it seemed to be like, I don't know, 30 seconds with no talking. It just was really, really bad. And to me, I kept on going back to the Liverpool-Napoli match and ended up sticking with that.
So, of course, I don't technically disagree. I know a lot of people have pushed back on me. I've got text messages from people about my tweets about this. I don't technically disagree. I think the thing we have to remember is it was a first match for Stu Holden doing play-by-play, being the main commentator. He's conversational type guy.
I think he's done stuff before that. I mean, he did Facebook Live, I think last season or the season before, which was...
Wasn't Rachel Panetta hosting those?
She was hosting it, but then usually she'd hand it over to whoever.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But I think he commentated one of those. Those really aren't even commentaries, though. It's almost like kind of a discussion, a conversation. But I get what you're saying in terms of this is his first time really doing a television commentary.
Yeah, and I think for me, if you're going to experiment with this sort of thing and then try and get some live on-site commentators that are your commentators who are speaking to your audience, might as well do it toward the end of the group stage rather than start doing this in the knockout stages in the semifinals of the Champions League. So. And obviously, this match was an occasion. Seems Steve Nash has a lot of access to Spurs for obvious reasons. So it was a pretty to Pochettino himself. So it was a pretty good match, I think, to pick this. Now, did this format work? Probably not. But I think it's pretty clunky. And quite frankly, Chris, the ratings are so low. I don't think it turns off that many viewers. I mean, we just got to remember how few people are watching this, and maybe you experiment with things that can engage new viewers.
Yeah, I think this would have had the complete opposite effect, though, to Kartik. It was that bad. I mean that's the thing, though, too. I mean, that Steve Nash got a lot of criticism for being a Spurs fanboy. I mean, just talking about Spurs throughout the entire game, and just, I mean, if you're a neutral, if you're a Spurs fan watching this, you're probably okay. But even then, they probably wouldn't have enjoyed it. But for everyone else, it's like this is just not right. I mean, to me, at the end of the day, I think last podcast I said, I think that they made the right decision going with the Spurs-Barcelona game. In hindsight, going into this, I think it was the wrong decision. They should have had the Liverpool-Napoli game on this one. You mean, imagine Stu Holden and Steve Nash at Anfield for that game. It would have been better in terms of atmosphere. But even going into the match twice before the game started, Steve Nash said, this doesn't mean anything. This game doesn't mean anything for Barcelona. So as a viewer who was planning on probably watching a lot of this game, I was like, you know what? Do I really want to watch this game? No, I'll just go ahead and watch the Liverpool-Napoli game instead, and I'll tune in back and forth and see how things are going on the Spurs match. But I think it was just a really bad mistake by Turner Sports. Hopefully they've learned from this. Hopefully they won't do this again. It just did not work at all. I mean, Stu Holden's a great analyst, but he does not have the style of a commentator. And even halftime, too. I think halftime you had the highlights from the game. But rather than them using the actual commentary from Stu and Steve Nash, you had, I think, Jonathan Pierce doing the commentary. And the game sounded like it was much more alive. It sounded like it was more energetic. It sounded like it was more exciting. And to me, with Stu Holden and Steve Nash in the game, it just was very flat, very unenergetic. It was just really just a toll, like kind of to get through this game. So hopefully they've learned the lesson.
Yeah, and hopefully production-wise, if they do another live telecast like this with their own commentators, the transitions, you could almost tell watching when they were cutting from images and microphones that were part of the UEFA feed to their own commentary. There were just, and again, this is difficult, and I'm picking on production this week for whatever reason, because I wasn't happy with how Fox handled the MLS Cup with the camera work and the cutaways and that sort of stuff. And again, I don't have any critiques of the actual program of the MLS Cup, the commentators, Strong and Holden or Lawless, etc. In studio. My critique is about the production. My concern, Chris, is that Turner, if they do this again, even if it's with a different set of commentators, they've got to get that mic work right. That creates some of the flatness you're talking about, and it's very subtle. Maybe it's because you and I have watched so much media and television through the years that we pick up on it more easily than others do. But that's a concern for me, because then that kind of sucks the energy out of a telecast.
Yeah. The other thing too is that the audio wasn't synced up with the video. So we've seen this so many times in the past with Fox where it just wasn't synced up, and we're like, oh my god, not again. And that to me is like that's almost even worse than a bad mic. Is that you're hearing the analysis either a second or two before it happens or a second or two after it happens, rather than it feeling live. And to me, that was just, please.
I thought it was my television, so I changed the channel and then changed it back. And Nash's voice was still, his lips were not synced with what was coming out still after I changed the channel. So I thought maybe it's on my end.
Right. Well, that's what I thought too when I was watching it, I think through Fubo, watching it on TNT. But then, yeah, it wasn't. It was completely the video and audio were not synced up. Moving on to Wednesday. Wednesday, I didn't pay as much attention to just because the games didn't mean as much. A lot of them were kind of done and dusted for the most part, other than kind of places within the groups. And the matches for me weren't as appealing as they were on Tuesday. But pre-match on Wednesday, a really good piece about Nuri from Ajax, a player that is not able to play again, a young star that was... They thought that there would be thought a lot of good things would come out of this player, and unfortunately, he's never going to be able to play again. And it was just a really stirring, emotional segment, really well produced by TNT about kind of the background about the story. And I thought that was really well done and great television. And I was like, wow, this is good. This is really, really good stuff. And then, of course, we talked about Tim Howard and Mo Adu and Kate Abdo talking about racism in soccer, and that was well done too. All right, Kartik, let's move on to the TV streaming news, and I'll have you kick it off, Kartik, with the big news.
Yeah, big news of the week here in the States, or actually in the UK as well. Jon Champion is moving to the United States to commentate on MLS games for ESPN. A former guest who's been a frequent guest on this show. ESPN producer Amy Rosenfeld, also a guest on this show in the past, said it will be determined on a case-by-case basis whether Champion can call Premier League games and tournaments if it doesn't interfere with this ESPN work. This is a fantastic move for Major League Soccer. It really kind of elevates the level of commentary. And next year they do have the MLS Cup, so Champion will call the MLS Cup alongside Taylor Twellman. It's a big move for ESPN. I think it's disappointing from a Premier League perspective and from quite frankly an EFL perspective, right? From a championship perspective in terms of especially that Friday match. But it really kind of ups the ante in terms of commentators here in the United States. And I think, Chris, it is important to note this. I know that this is I don't want to get here, and there's a lot of and I actually am a political liberal. There's a lot of among the left saying, "Oh, who would want to live in the United States now?" I see more and more people who are professionals in Europe saying, you know what, if we have the opportunity to move and live and raise our family in the United States, we're going to do it, even more than in the past. So, I mean, this thing cuts both ways, and it's great to have him here. He'll be in the States. We have seen commentators based in the United States be able